I got a firm grip.
We are live. Go ahead, Joe.
Uh, Hello, welcome to Lowballing. This is Joe Hansen. One more time, we're starting a new season this year, kind of going under a little different format. Again, with me is Alan Gamboa. I don't know why he hasn't dropped me like a Led Zeppelin yet, but we're still sticking it together. Today we have with us Benjamin or BL Blankenship. Um, he writes several different genres. What we're going to be focusing on today is not so much as individual books. We're going to be focusing on what authors call world building. Now, a lot of you, when you first hear that term, you're going to think about shaping of the earth or something along that lines, which in science fiction and fantasy is very much the case. But world building is more the society and the environment that you write within. And BL here, he writes westerns and true to life, or he has some true. We'll let him tell you. BL, tell me about setting up a new book and the type of world that you're going to write within.
Well, they tend to be really, really violent. The first fiction book that I ever wrote, and I began writing fiction to make money, was God Walks the Dark Hills, book 1 and 2. So it's a dual novel. That's what it sounds like. It's 2 novels inside one book. So you're talking 80,000 words plus a novel defined as 40,000 words. I'm just putting that out there because I know that there's some places that say different, but the majority, I think, are 40,000, novella 20,000. So that's how I look at it and what I base it on. Novellas are way easier to write than novels. They're towards the end. You're always like, I've got to add something and make it feel natural or whatever. So I wrote that. It was just going to be 2 separate books. I'd paid somebody for cover art, wasn't thrilled with it, and told my wife, I'm like, well, what if I get both books and put them together? That way I'm not going to have to pay for cover art again and again. And she went with it. So I found an amazing cover artist. Now, I've did some cover art of mine as well, but his name is Wendy Sabercore. And Wendy Sabercore does 2 types of art, horror and metal. And so that's on my covers. I wanted them to look really dark and violent on there. God Walks the Dark Hills will have 6 books in all. The last book, which will be coming out in 2023, winter of 2023, will be a dual novel as well. All of the others are already out. The first 2 is a dual novel. The other ones are singular novel. There you have that. I've written a collection of short stories, an anthology, serial novelette called Abraham Lincoln Burns in
God,
Hell.
God walks the dark hills. Is that what it is? God walks
Yeah,
the dark.
yes, it's like the
That's
next
an
of my
interesting
world.
title for one. What is the society like in that? Is it city? Is it country? Is it very rural? Is it desert? What is it? Talk to me about that. About the world that you wrote within
Okay.
that story within.
The entire series of God Walks the Dark Hills will follow a few characters, but primarily one character that is born in the 1830s in the city, kingdom of Loango, that's in Congo, Africa. He is sold into Cuban slavery. He is emancipated by a Cajun Spaniard.
So
Uh,
when you say kingdom, is that a general reference for the whole
it's a real
story,
place.
or is that
No,
just
no, that's at
that
the
area that has a
that's a real
kingdom?
place. That's at the first of it. Things fall in my lap because it it's like it gives me the reins to be apocalyptic because their flag was a blue flag with the right hand of Jesus Christ with 7
Whose
stars in it.
flag?
So, the kingdom of Loango. So I
Okay.
mean, their flag is screaming apocalyptic Book of Revelations, and that is like so dark, right there. But so anyway, his character, he gets emancipated. This guy that emancipates him, I bought you to set you free, essentially, is his message, is as much of the Jesus character as anybody could be, which means that I kill him. And then the guy's going to exact revenge against the people that did that. He fights as a black Confederate in the American Civil War in a fictitious militia called Heaven 7. They're like a black sheep militia. In real life, like every group was represented in the North and the South both.
Is that the period that this is written in? Is in the 1860s?
So the novels, they'll go up all the way up into the early 1900s, but in book 1, it goes all the way up to the Battle of Shiloh. You know, I told you it's a dual novel. In book 2, it goes to the end of the Civil War. Book 3 is the Reconstruction era. Book 4 is the 1870s. So 5 and 6 will be next. And really, they're going to take an interesting turn. I don't care to say like spoiler and let a little bit of it be known.
We want to do that.
Right.
What we want to do is we want to
Yes.
break it down for the people who watch so that they understand what the world I'm talking about is. So you're writing it in approximately both sides of the 1860s era.
Yeah, 1830s through about 1906 is where that entire 6-book series will take anybody. So through the Civil War and all that.
Basically around the Civil War,
mm-hmm.
But you've also incorporated African kingdoms and Cuba. So this is like a global Civil War, or
this is like the African slave trade and the fallout from the American Civil War and how cruel people are. In book number 5, it will follow that main character. There's going to be a big showdown in book 6. I'll just leave that one there, say that that's back in America. But book 5 is going to be the weird kid, and probably the most violent one in it. 5 and 6 is one book. There's a thing called Free State of Congo, where King Leopold II of Belgium, I'm going to call it slavery 2.0. Bad, horrific, ghastly, monster, like Adolf Hitler's psychopath, cutting off people's hands and feet.
This was back in the 1860s?
This was, I think it started in the 1880s, particularly.
Okay.
There's a book called Heart of Darkness about it. Go ahead, Ellen.
Right.
Were you going to say something, Alan, or no?
Oh, I was going to say, yes. Am I cutting out on you guys, or
a little bit?
Am I cutting out? I must be cutting out. Got to be my internet. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
A little bit. Okay. I was going to say, you write. Yours are all period pieces, basically, right? On your stories.
It's Western horror, so yes. And when I say Western, I mean a time frame. I don't mean that it's confined to the West, because most of mine is like in the South. I mean, I go to Chicago and San Francisco and stuff like that too. But it's a period piece.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, because I don't
understand
how that would be considered a Western. Civil War was during the Western period, but the Civil War wasn't Western. I mean, that was
okay.
Yeah, but look at
go ahead.
Look at Firefly.
Yeah.
Look at Western, and then the future. I think a Western is a state of mind.
Yeah.
And this is a Western right here, obviously. I find it.
Well, I wrote a futuristic Western,
especially,
and
that's a neo-Western. Yeah. If it's not in the Western time, they call it a neo-Western. Neo meaning new. So if you talk about the cattle drive, where did that start? The Carolinas. South was the Old West, the Wild West, before there was a Wild West. So, sure. I mean, it has the vibe. I believe that you can put a West in New York City. If it's at a certain time period, it's the West. I mean, it has a full-on cowboy thing going on. I did not hesitate in putting Chicago in one of my books a little bit. San Francisco gets put in there quite a bit. I think that's an amazing-looking city. I've been all over the U.S.
I don't know if I could agree with that because when you look back at the early New York, that had such a European influence. I picture more the street toughs and the gangs and the bolo hats and the derbies and when you're talking Western, I think you're talking more cowboys and long dusty coats and what were the long coats they wore? Cowboys wore those
You're talking about a duster,
Dusters.
a frock coat.
duster
Yeah.
frock or something like that.
Have you ever
Where
watched Copper?
who?
Copper?
No, I have not.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that. No.
Okay. Let me just give you a disclaimer. It was made by the people that made Hell on Wheels. Hell on Wheels is so much
I
better
like
than
Hell on
Copper's ever
Wheels.
thought about being. Hell on Wheels can chew Copper up and spit it out. It tries to be that cool. I got the seasons of it because Hell on Wheels is one of my favorites. I mean, it is.
Yeah,
just
I loved Hell on Wheels, and
Yeah.
I think that is truly a western.
but
Probably
but
one of the better modern day westerns.
but Copper is in New York, and that's why I mentioned that. And it's around the time of the Civil War. The guy had fought for the North. He had went back to be the police and all that. It completely has that vibe. It's just in a big city and not the Wild West, but it has the vibe. There has to be a certain kind of vibe and feel, to it as well. But you get that through the era, especially when there's a lot of horses riding through the city and not really any cars and maybe like one or two. Incidentally, my Josie Wells book is a very late Western. It is in 1900 and 1901 is when it takes place. So, they think that this guy's dead. He's like a relic from the past, but Josie Wells is alive and kicking and you don't want to mess with him.
Okay, we'll give that a shot.
Since we're on that, since you're on that, tell us more about that. How that it's a public domain character that you've been able to grab onto and write a story about.
Yes. Man, there's a lot that I could say about Josie Wells. Okay, so in the 1960s is when the books were written. The guy's pen name was Forrest Carter that wrote Josie Wells. The name that it's most known under, they had it published under 3 different names, was Gone to Texas. The reason that me and you and probably most of the audience know what that is because there's a man named Clint Eastwood who portrayed him in a super famous movie, The Outlaw Josie Wells, which is based on that first book. There was a follow-up book that was called Vengeance Trail of Josie Wells. Now, I'm going to tell you all as readers, it's a fantastic book, but if you're thinking, well, it's going to be a great movie too, the movie doesn't do the book justice. It's a really good book. Mexican gangs raping a bunch of girls and Josie Wells killing every single one of them is the short synopsis of what that book is
that
about.
wasn't Clint Eastwood, was it?
No, it wasn't. I forget the man's name. There's a Wikipedia page about it, but they had a different actor play that. In fact, I believe that the second movie, which is called Return of Josie Wells, is free on YouTube to watch. So there is that. The Outlaw Josie Wells, if somebody's wanting to watch it and thinking, where can I watch that for free? Tubi has it. You got to have like commercials in there, but TVUBI .tv. I love them.
Yeah, Tubby, yeah.
Tubi's got some great movies on there.
They do.
Well, great movie to you and great movie to me, Alan, are very different things. You're a Sharknado fan,
true.
right?
I like the first couple. They were fun because you got to take it in that mindset. You can make a drinking game out of it. But that's pretty cool that you're able to take that public domain character and write a story about it. And I'm sure you love the character of Josie Wells.
Oh, I love it.
That's got to be kind of
a big thing with that I've made great strides to do, because I think somebody's just going to hate me. There's a lot of properties that we see in this day and age that we're living in whatever they may be. They're from another book or a comic book or the Lord of the Rings. Amazon just made a series off of that. And you have people that are like, you are the worst person in the world and I hate you and you've destroyed this and that. I really, truly tried to honor the catalog of everything that there is that's Josie Wells. And I say certain little things that relate to his history and what have you with the book. I say certain little things that actually refer to real history with Quantrell's Raiders and Bloody Bill Anderson. He didn't ride with Quantrell. If you watched the movie and read the book, he rode with Bloody Bill Anderson. Quantrell was killed. Bloody Bill under his wing took in Jesse James in real life and Josie Wells in fiction. Bloody Bill's a really interesting character too, because he blamed the government for killing his two sisters, which would be on a long list of people that the government's killed, and he would scream their names as he ran into battle to kill the federal troops. That was his battle cry. I don't remember their names, but he would scream the names of his dead sisters. He was seething mad. Bloody Bill was. He was a really violent person. Quantrell was born in the North and believed that Lincoln was wrong. There were a lot of copperheads, a lot of people that believed that. But he went from Dover, Ohio, and he was a school teacher, and he started, all of that and everything. But he was a brilliant leader. Really acted a lot of the ways that Josie Wells acted. He was kind of one of these gallant, soldier guys. Somebody wanted to surrender in a house that they were in, and they threw him out the window and kept fighting. Yeah, he did some kind of noble things. Wouldn't let people take advantage of civilians. Bloody Bill, he just wanted to kill as many of the Union people as possible. He was like bloodthirsty, enraged, mad. You murdered my family, and I will kill every one of you kind of person. Going on in there. But yeah, if you've read Josie Wells or even watched the movie, he was in a border state. His family was murdered, and he says, "I'll be going with you." And he's trying to exact revenge, and then he just becomes an outlaw because he's not going to take the oath to America after everything that the country's done with him. So he's a man without a country, kind of that thing going on. That's why Jesse James would rob the carpetbagging federal banks, because he was trying to get his reparations from what the country had did to him, how they had ruined his life, and really had like a Robin Hood sort of persona because of that. Helped some people out. So did Al Capone. Al Capone fed the hungry and everything in his soup kitchens. But when you're selling untaxed alcohol, you've got a hit on your head. But yeah, there's a number of characters like that. But there were people that loved them and thought, man, this guy's a hero. And the government was like, we've got to shut them down.
Right.
We've got to kill them. Yeah.
So when you're writing about the Civil War, I'm assuming you're keeping pretty much a focus on the slavery issue, or do you bring in the other issues around the Civil War into it? Because it was about a lot more than just slavery.
Amen. Yes, it was. Okay, so here's the thing that I bring in, because when you actually do primary research, and you get this based on the comment that you said, there were a few people that said it wasn't about slavery. Every leader, Abraham Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's, I think the quote is, if I could win this war without freeing one slave, I would do it. That's what it was about. Now, at the same time, you did have some newspapers that were coming out, and they were saying stuff. I know about the Corwin Amendment and all that stuff, and we could get into a bunch of historical narrative. At the end of the day, it is a fiction book. But what I essentially say is that I told somebody before that there's 3 tenets to Western horror, and it's time period stuff. God is judge. That's the way it was preached in church. We didn't have, the lovey billy stuff. God is judge. The devil is real. People are cruel, and I really drive that people are cruel home. You can see in that war a real devaluing of human lives. We need to get this railroad up and running so we can take this country and drive the red man into the ocean. I mean, that was the American Civil War. The states and they're in the center. They can keep their slaves so long as they succumb to the power of the federal government. Hey, I know. Let's make a thing and we'll call it an Emancipation Proclamation and say 2 times in it, people can read it, 2 times in it, that it's only a provision of war, and quite literally that every single place that the federal government had the power to free a slave, they said, we're not going to free them there, but we're freeing slaves everywhere where we actually can't free a slave. People still in the midst of that, they believe what they believe, the Juneteenth and all that. There were people that believed, hey, Lincoln did this to free the slaves. There were people like President Garfield, who winds up in the book. I wanted to pick somebody because, I've got these Confederate protagonists. I wanted to pick somebody that you can't have every Confederate good and every Union person bad, even if your protagonists are the Confederates, because that's not the way that people are. People aren't that one-dimensional. So I had President Garfield there. President Garfield legitimately joined the American Civil War, believing that it was to free the slaves. That was his belief. He had petitioned people, all that. Lincoln and Garfield were not alike. By the way, all people, I want to say that, I know that like Lincoln gets put up on a pedestal. He's a man that could do no wrong. That's kind of unrealistic. If you read, there were a lot of people that hated Lincoln. But I digress. Enough about that. But I try to look at all of the issues. There's a war going on, and as an author that's writing horror and violent stuff, you've got a lot of drama and tension there. If you say, I'm going to make my protagonist a Confederate, here's what you've got going on. You've got that they're in an area of the country that is being invaded by an army that's 2 to 4 times the size of them. So they're outnumbered, they're overrun, civilians are being attacked. You've got Benjamin, the butcher butler, in New Orleans putting out a decree for the soldiers to rape all of the women. You have them blowing Atlanta apart, burning it to the ground, things that are very responsible for the Spanish-American War, for World War I, for World War II. That wasn't a thing that went on where it's like, we're just going to go to killing civilians like crazy. But, that's the way the North did it. That's the way that Sherman did it and what he pushed. He's like, we've got to make these people hate this war because nothing's happening to them. And that's just the matter of fact what it is. So when you're writing horror and you can have that cruel brutality, when you can have the cruel brutality that I have about what all went on in the wilderness, I've researched all these accounts. I've read books on it. I've listened to these podcasts for these people that go through all this war stuff. You get somebody that's dying in the woods and they're saying to their commander, would you just put a bullet through my head and just kill me? And they're like, I just can't waste a bullet. You're just going to have to die like a man. You've got nightfall and people or the tree branches are on fire and they're falling on people and they're burning alive. And you can hear their howlings and their screams. I don't have to make that stuff up. That's really how it was. But I do tie fiction in with it. I do have the militia Heaven 7 go along with a real Confederate troop and go through these real places in the order that they would have. And I try to have them do things that make sense. Outside of that, I do have some characters that they're not exactly human. I call some of them chthonic idiot gods. It just makes it worse and worse because when you see how awful like the people are, and then you start throwing the supernatural card in there, like it's you think this is bad. There's things in the shadows that people don't even know about. And it just gets really some way. But yeah, I tie real lore and stuff into things. I have a character called the Lincoln Man, and he's kind of based off of Spring Hill Jack that has some Jersey Devil, Slender Man kind of stuff in it. Spring Hill Jack had 3 forms he could take on. A devil demony form, which is the one that looks like Lincoln with the hot coal burning eyes, a ghost form, which is the faceless Slender Man, and then a bear-like form, just looks like a bear with the mange, only I have is more like badger faced. So, I've got some stuff like that in it, and I borrow from all kinds of things. El Sabone gets mentioned in the Confederado, Western, what is it? a Western horror tale of Mesoamerican Gore. That's a novella that I wrote. Really, really, really dark and crazy, violent.
Okay, now you wrote about the Civil War,
Yes.
and you use the actual characters that are in the Civil War,
Yes.
and then you have another novel with Josie Wales
Novella. But yes.
in novella. Isn't that fan fiction? I mean, you haven't actually gone in and developed your own world or your own society. You've more adopted the ones that were there, and I'm just do you have anything that you've written that was completely, I don't want to use the term original because your writing is original. Um,
No, it is. And the reason that I
Yeah,
use
no,
other
definitely.
things, the reason that I use like the Civil War and Lincoln and all this stuff, and I don't have it on like Narnia, for example, is because it makes it feel more realistic. If you can say on this day and in this place and then this town, so I don't have a Castle Rock in my
right.
Stephen King. I'm presuming everybody knows that, but I'll just go ahead and say it just in case. I don't have places like that. But if I say somebody was in like Boulder, Colorado, they never go there, by the way. But if I said somebody was in Boulder, Colorado, you would know where that was on a map and be like, oh, that place was there in such and such year and this and this and this and all that kind of thing. So even though I'm writing about this fantastical stuff, I think it makes it feel more realistic that I'm tethering it to something that's real, even though it's fiction, and it makes it more gut wrenching. And I don't just try to scare people; I try to scar people because I think that that's what good horror does. I can still hear the Jaws music when I get in the Gulf to go out there swimming. You know what I'm talking about? Because that was good horror. Just those dun-dun notes, the way that was a book before it was a movie, by the way. But just the way that Jaws was portrayed, that was fantastic horror. It wasn't a horror comedy. It wasn't something that was just like cheeky. My stuff is really extreme. I spit on your grave. You know, all that. I mean, extreme. You have to explain that to people because I had this one podcast that they said we thought we knew what extreme horror was. We thought extreme horror was Clive Barker, which I'm not going to just like bust out laughing here. That's not extreme horror. Jack Ketchum is what extreme horror is.
Yes.
Extreme
Richard
horror
Lehman,
is
he's kind of like that.
Yeah, torturing people. Saw, Human Centipede, Martyrs. I mean, I'm naming movies here instead of books, but I'm hoping that somebody knows what I mean. The French version of Martyrs. I mean, they're peeling a girl's skin off. They're keeping people held hostage. They want them to have this like out of body experience and tell them what the afterlife's like. So it's like we're going to torture them so bad. It's ghastly and it's monstrous. And I think that when you write about things that are really evil and ghastly and vile, they need to feel like they are. A lot of times I'll have these scenes that are kind of like hard to watch scenes, but the way that I feel about it, and I used to be all into like law enforcement stuff and watch all the serial killer documentaries and all that sort of thing. I don't think that evil, like when you close your eyes, that it just backs off. It's still there and it's probably even closer and it's still going on. And when you have something like that and you say, oh gee, you know, in the Confederado, these guys that didn't like my book and they did a really thorough job bashing it. By the way, it was great. I'm not going to plug their show because that's just not good business. But they actually read a segment of it that's one of the more like vile segments of it, and it says something like it was something that words could or pen couldn't even describe. And do you know what I did after that? I went into describing it. Because it's like that just makes it even more awful. When you say this is just so horrific, nobody could even tell what it's like. And then it's like, but now I'm going to tell you.
But wait, there's more.
Think, you know, that's what you want. You just want them to think, oh, gee. Because they should feel that way. Because if something is really awful and sinister and you know, evil or whatever, you want people to think, man, you know, that I'm not justifying it, and it's not just there for just like show to have something that way, and maybe it doesn't further the plot the way somebody feels like it should, but it shows you what somebody's character is, and you think, man, I hope they kill them. And just spoiler alert, they do. A lot of people
you know,
die in that book. A lot.
Well, you've got your world building. You got a big sandbox to play in with especially with those eras, and that's really cool. You know, I find Gothic Western horror. I'm just throwing that here to put it in a ball. I find I love that. I love that, and I'm definitely gonna check out some of your books
Thank
now.
you so much.
John Carpenter.
I'm waiting for you.
He had
I'm waiting for you to
vampire Western that he wanted.
You know what I mean?
Western.
That's the Death's Head Press terminology,
oh, yeah.
and they have really helped it so much.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of vampire westerns before.
That's good because there's a lot of people that are into splatter.
Splatter?
Yeah.
Sounds like something that happens in a dairy barn.
You know, the whole SplatterPunk thing, and it was. I'm trying to remember what his name was. That Patrick Harrison III.
Was it? They wrote zombie, right? They started out with zombie type of stuff. There's two guys, right? That wrote together.
That said, initially, their first book was Magpie Coffin, that came out in their series that Wiley Young did, and it's absolutely brilliant. I've went through a lot of their books, and they vary. They're not like canonical or whatever. It's different authors that write them. Christopher Triana's got him an award and everything. SplatterPunk is a wide, broad thing. It's a derivative of how horror was in the 1980s. Think Jason Voorhees. That's straight up what it is. You know how the Friday the 13th movies were, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they can do. Yeah. They can go the way of comedy or whatever. But basically, what they're saying is that it's a Western horror thing, and where they figured we're just going to go ahead and we're going to coin this term, then immediately they had about 13 books that were phrased under something that nothing else is. So if you said who's the best splatter Western thing, Death's Head Press, I think it's brilliant. But I just call mine Western horror, which Western horror is a subsect of Weird West, which is a subgenre of Western if you really get down to it, because Weird West can be sci-fi or fantasy or whatever. Mine's just on the horror end. And when I say horror, I mean really violent, sometimes demonic possessions and whatnot, but it's just people blowing people all to pieces, etc.
I remember when I was reading the Weird West comic books, you know, I think about the Weird West, something like that. It was an offshoot of Weird War magazine, you know, where they would have the horror stories or the stories set in the Western era, and I've always been a fan of that. Like I was saying, John Carpenter years ago was going to have a Western vampire story. I think it's called El Dorado or something like that. He never got it made, and I was always hoping for that to come out, because John Carpenter in a Western, that would be great horror.
Yeah,
you know. So I'm really looking forward to reading some of your books.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
It really has.
Critters 4
and the world building, like Joe's talking about. You've got a toolbox, a toy box, a sandbox right there. That whole everything there. You know, it's unique, and you can actual like you have, you know, and fictional like you have. So that's I mean, you've got a big canvas there.
Well, it gets bigger too.
Not a lot of writers have a.
It gets bigger too. A friend of mine, LB Simpson, she's amazing, by the way. She writes kind of the slow burn ghost story type things. She tells me that I'm a good like Gothic writer. I don't know if I'm Gothic or what. In God Walks the Dark Hills, book 4, I have a character make a cameo. This character's another public domain character. None, you know, nobody else that shows up in it really is. He's known as the Wandering Jew, or also Ahasuerus of Jerusalem. Are you all familiar with who that is? He's been around a long, long time.
Sounds familiar.
No.
Okay,
Is that
so
Go
Alan?
ahead. No, go ahead and tell us there, BL.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Okay.
think. Go ahead.
Okay. So I thought I wanted him to be in there. So he was a shoemaker. By the way, again, fiction. Now this is almost like Jesus fan fiction, but he was a shoemaker in Jerusalem, and so we know the story of Jesus. Jesus is carrying his cross, and he's going up to Golgotha, and that's where this takes place in there. So he's been beat and all that. You know, his flesh is hanging like ribbons, and it's horrific. So there Ahasuerus is, and he's cursing Jesus Christ. And for all practical purposes in this, so if somebody's not watching that's a Christian, God incarnate, you know, because that's the way that the story makes sense. So, you know, if you don't bear that, what, you know, I mean, I'm not going to go into what all C.S. Lewis said and everything about Jesus, that, you know, he's either a lunatic or God, because you can't pick anything else. But so Jesus says to him in this fictitious story, you know, it's like it became big during the Dark Ages, by the way, that he was going to be cursed until that great, terrible, you know, final judgment day of God. He wasn't going to see death. So grasp this: he's cursed with immortality, like Dracula, and he's bitter against God for it. So that's what his character is that he's an immortal, that every 100 years that he reverts to looking back like he's in his 20s or 30s, before he went to you know, before he cursed the Lord Jesus Christ and all of that. People have went a few different ways with his character, and I thought, what would I do with his character? Because some people try to make him like, you know, an evangelist. And I thought, how does the human mind work? And I've read all of this, you know, extra biblical literature and all that, as well as the Bible. I love it. But so what happens with him in my story, and it's a bunch of stories, and this is coming out, by the way, he's going to try and think this isn't real. Denial. He's going to try and think maybe God will change his mind. Maybe I can go out and be the next Apostle Paul or whatever. And there's this miraculous stuff, like things won't kill him because he's cursed with immortality. And so he's going to win some converts, and he's going to find I'm still an immortal. The people that I love are still dying, and I'm bitter against God. And so I'm just going to leave it there and say that he's going to roll with that. But there's going to be a lot of bitter anger. And, you know, I think of the book of Enoch and everything with that. If people don't know what that is, that's where the sons of God, the angels, they saw the daughters of men were fair, and they went, and there were the Nephilim, and the world was what it was before the flood and Noah. Right. So you get into all this antediluvian stuff, which allows me to take the book into some fun places, because I talk a bit about that. I don't know if you all know what Attack on Titan is, or if you've ever seen the live action of that.
Yes.
But that so made me think of that giants ripping people apart, eating them. And it's like, that's what we need. We need pre-flood Nephilim giants, you know, the byproduct of angels and mortal women ripping people apart, eating them. This is going to be awesome. You know, theologically, after the flood, their spirits, because of what they were, wouldn't like go to heaven or hell, and that's what the unclean demonic spirits are that torment people and what have you. But I do have him make an appearance, and I thought, you know, I think that would be a neat little thing to go ahead and to write something up on the Wandering Jew character. I just think that he's a neat character, and you know what's wild is when you talk to somebody in church, they're like, really? And it's like, it's fiction. But you know, you borrow for things. You say that he cursed that man just like Jesus Christ cursed the fig tree, you know. But no, it's totally a fictitious story. But I'm writing a lot of like fake pseudepigraphical type books and everything like that in there. So it's going to be kind of like a compendium of not real writings that tell stories and stuff like that. And I'm thinking about having like a sea captain's like ship log where he was on a ship, and you know, but I've got it mapped out. What is he going to do for this 100 years? What is he going to do over here? And it'll be what it'll be. It also makes kind of like a fun project, like when my mind's going blank writing something else. It'll be at sometime this year but it's something that I can like divert to, and the format's neat. I have one of the books within the book, kind of like the Septuagint. So like how the Bible's formatted, but like the left page is in Greek. That's through
Oh,
the
wow.
Google, like the Google Babel thing, the translator that it does. I cannot write in
Yeah.
Greek. I've got one that's kind of like how the Quran is, where it's like a column in English and a column in Arabic, which, if there are any Muslims writing that are like
Right.
hardcore, they would say that it's not really the Quran if the whole thing's not in Arabic. And I do understand that, but I'm saying the English translation. I did that because it won't translate like into Akkadian, which is really what I would want it to be in. But that's such an ancient dead language that I can't do that.
Do you speak Akkadian?
So it's all
No.
Greek to you anyway, right?
That's exactly right. No, it's just like little portions of Hebrew and Greek and all that. Every now and then I'll write something in Latin or whatever. But the way the internet is now,
Sounds like
so neat.
patois, actually. You know what they speak in Jamaica, the patois.
I do know that. Yeah. Have you ever looked up online that they have a Jamaican Bible? And you can listen to it in audio, and it just sounds like somebody's reading the Bible with a Jamaican accent. It like says "mon" and stuff in it, But it's entertaining to me because you
But is
listen
that
to
actual English or is that in patois?
that. So Patois is kind of like a gibberish between several different languages.
Right.
So I mean you've got enough English in there that it's English, but then they'll use these phraseologies or something like that. I think if somebody's in charge, the
English,
term is he runs the
German,
road.
and English, German, and something else that it's basically derived from.
It's got some like
Basically,
kind of Creole type stuff in it or whatever there, but yeah, it's kind of like a slave tongue that
right.
there was, but it's neat. I think that
It's pretty cool when you hear him talking in it. So is religion a main feature in all of the worlds you create?
religion isn't really a main theme, really in all of it. They're horror stories, but here's the deal: the psychology of people. So I feel like everybody's kind of the hero of their own story. Whatever you're
Right.
doing, you have a way that you're justifying. It's what's your worldview that you justify what you're doing. And what's this one, and let's not like act like this thing doesn't exist or that thing doesn't exist. It's like where are these people coming from? And I do a lot of that in it.
Like, where the fuck did he go?
You know what I mean?
Yep, I do.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work.
It's a ton of work.
What's going on in that head? What's going on in that head of yours, man?
It never stops.
It's amazing to me.
Alan tries to do everything
It's
from
a
an
world
island
building.
standpoint. That way, the world's nice and tight.
Yeah. Now I'll tell you.
Yes,
so
right?
like in Abraham Lincoln Burns in Hell, which totally here's the way that this goes. I'm going to be at the sci-fi convention. I'm a special guest at it, and I thought, well, my stuff is so horror, it's not really sci-fi. Nice. So it's quirky. It's a lot lighter. The premise, and we talked about this before the show, of Abraham Lincoln Burns in Hell, which the term is taken from like Carrie White Burns in Hell. John Wilkes Booth travels to other dimensions of Earth to assassinate different tyrannical variants of Abraham Lincoln. So it's tacky and it's quirky and it's tasteless. So in every single book, his motive, like Quantum Leap or Doctor Who or Sliders, is to kill Lincoln in that world. So I will take real things about Lincoln and I will look at history and stuff in the world and think, how can I super enhance this thing and have this thing happen and it'll be different. So let me just paint a scape for you in the first two books without like spelling out every little detail that happens. The second place, after his normal home that John Wilkes Booth goes to is a steampunk Boston. Why is it steampunk? Well,
Oh wow.
in the American Civil War, and there's a lot of stuff that went on. There were things that went on with the Catholic Church that was prohibiting England and all from getting involved too. But in the American Civil War, and in our world, England and France did not intervene on the behalf of the Confederacy, and if they did, it would have been wildly different. At the same time, during the war, because they had lost the Crimean War, the Russian ships were outside of New York. Also, in reality, Abraham Lincoln was friends with a man named Karl Marx. All of that plays into it. So what I have happen is I have England and France come in and side with the Confederacy. They're being abused. They're being done wrong. That's the way it happens on Earth too. So there is a North-South Korea thing that happens to the United States, where the North is tied in with Russia and Marx, so Germany. It starts getting Zeppelins. It starts getting advanced. It starts becoming the steampunk North, while you still get this rural South. So it's advancing that much more. And John Wilkes Booth is in the steampunk Boston to take him out. Does he succeed? Well, there's another book, so figure it out. And the next
So
book,
you don't worry about
are these novellas?
You don't worry about
those are not novelettes. So here's the deal. I normally tend to write in a sweeping third person narrative. That is my normal default writing. All my books are like that, but not Abraham Lincoln Burns in Hell. Abraham Lincoln Burns in Hell is kind of Sherlock Holmesy. So I do like a bunch of journal entries and like fake newspaper things and all that, and I have them put together in a way that it spells out how the world is. And also the guy comes in and does a little narration stuff that's given Booth the ability to travel through different dimensions and be the hero of the multiverse by killing all the tyrant Lincolns. But so in the next book, it's like, well, what am I going to do here? And a big thing with me as a writer is I don't want people to really like see it coming. It's like, how can I knee jerk and make it different? So he's been in what we think of as the time when Booth killed Lincoln at Ford's Theater, and he's been in steampunk Boston. So he goes into the papal, United States of America, where Lincoln is basically the Pope of America, and he's in Philadelphia. How did that happen? Well, I thought about that, and I thought,
so you are kind of shooting from the hip on historical accuracy.
Well, I'm changing the way the world is in these alternate dimensions, and that's
because
where there's
the English supporting the Confederates during the Civil War is a little ridiculous, since England was one of the first countries to stand up and fight against slavery. I mean, they were waylaying all the Dutch ships.
Now, what you said is right there, but there was an enormous amount of support. There was an enormous amount of support for the South from England, and there was this big quibbling back and forth, and it had even been stated that the Roman question was the way that it was faced, the stuff that the Catholic Church had going on, that it kept them from that. So there was not a hard, we're not going to do that. There's this hard no, that didn't exist. It was looking like it was going to happen and all that. So nonetheless, in our dimension, that didn't happen, but in that one it did, and it's an alternate dimension, so it falls into the what if category.
Sure.
And if England and France did step up for the Confederacy, if we look at how the war was going, that would have halted
France
it.
was strongly influenced by the Catholic Church, but England wasn't at that time. They were under the Church of England, and the Catholic Church had been almost completely thrown out of England.
I adore history. I know where you're coming from with that. In the second Abraham Lincoln Burns in Hell book, so I have a papal state north, and the way that happened was I thought, okay, the thought behind that, every single president of the United States, what do they say? Doesn't matter how they feel about what, man, they're a good Christian person. And I thought, what about going all Book of Eli and the religious mask that people wear? And so I thought about the Revolutionary War. What if that didn't happen the way that it happened? Because do you know who's pretty powerful? The Catholic Church. What if the Catholic Church put its foot down and said, this isn't going down this way? We're going to let these people like buy them out of that thing, and they can be their own people and all that. So doing that only made the Catholic Church more powerful than the Catholic Church already was / is. and you kind of had this church state structure America because of that in the second book on Earth 3. So Lincoln, he was just kind of writing that and playing that card. But, I was totally thinking like Book of Eli and some stuff like that. In those books, I do put in like bonus material, like that's actual stuff and talk about like, here's where I pulled this from. And I have like actual quotes in the epigraph and what have you. But again, the book is fiction. The one that I'm writing right now that'll be out here in 2023, Abraham Lincoln Burns in Hell, book 3. But which, by the way, unless there's a huge demand, by that I mean a lot of money coming in, there probably won't be another one after that. There certainly could be. I could just go on and on, but it's going to be a solar punk north.
Solar punk.
Yes, specifically set in.
Explain
it's a real
that. The steampunk is like what I want to focus on with the world building thing, because when you build a steampunk world, it's completely different than everything else. What is a solar punk?
A solar punk world is extremely futuristic, clean technology, and it's always a socialistic society. So picture a world where you've got all these white buildings that have gardens and lush plants and everything growing, and it's solar power and it's wind power and it's kinetic energy. So you don't have oil dripping and all that. Just picture.
Why is it always socialistic?
That's just the nature of it. That's just the way that I'm not making that up. That is the way that solar punk stuff is. There's some anime series or whatever about it. It's just the way that it is. I didn't invent it.
You didn't? Okay, so solar punk is an actual genre.
It's a real thing. So's diesel punk. So's a cyberpunk. So's a lot of that stuff. I am totally ripping from other tropes, and I do talk about what would be in the future books. In this, dread punk is a real thing. It's like Victorian England, Wolfman, vampire. Lunar punk is a real thing. It's like glowing mushrooms and witchy magic.
Okay.
Those are real. Stone punk is a real thing. I think the movie that they did with Stone punk was what was it called? It had DC in it, and it was those cavemen people that fight like the Egyptian guys with the long fingers. You know what I'm talking about? And they got the big saber-toothed cat in it. So like 20,000 BC or something, or 100,000.
Oh yeah, that was.
Yeah. Okay.
That's stone punk. Stone punk's like kind of caveman-esque stuff going on. But yeah, those are real tropes. Of course, steampunk is way huger than any of them, and I do love it. And there's a part of me that would like to do book 4 because I like the cyberpunk thing. When I was a teenager, that was it. Blade Runner, Total Recall, Ghost in the Machine. That's cyberpunk.
Yeah, I was familiar with cyberpunk, and I was familiar with steampunk, and I didn't know about the Luna punk. And,
solar punk, lunar punk.
I hadn't heard that, or solar.
Yeah, they're way more niche, but it's like, how can I do this?
Stone punk, boy, there's just all kinds of punk.
Oh yeah. What I do in those books too is that I will borrow public domain characters from around like the 1800s from actual just normal literature that people know of, like Dickens, for example, and I will superimpose them in it. I think like, what would a Star Trek episode do or whatever, and I'll superimpose them.
Star Trek, is that a show? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh, I love it. I love. That's really more of my wife's cup of tea. She's into all the sci-fi things. But yeah, I like the original a lot. I really liked Enterprise. I hated that it wasn't put up there higher. Not just because the Vulcan's cute, even though that helps.
Yeah, I don't know why I was.
I was a fan of the original, and I didn't watch much of it after that. So.
Did you not like Next Generation?
No, I did not.
See, that was my Star Trek though when I was a kid. I didn't see the original then. I saw Next Generation. Yeah, so Q and the Borg and all that was it, and then I got pulled into the original later because I liked Next Gen so well.
Huh. Yeah, that wasn't
I never got into it.
I never got into Next Gen. I watched the original. I was that way with the Star Wars movies, too. I liked the first 3, As soon as I saw Jar Jar Binks, I stopped watching it.
That was
But
the
see,
worst
those are my
one of
kids'
it.
Star Wars.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the worst one
see
of
that?
the second trilogy too. That I liked episode 3. I didn't like 1 and 2. I've not watched any. Well, I think I've seen like 2 different movies that they've made after that. But it's
Right.
almost like in Spaceballs. They talk about the quest for more money.
Yeah.
It's just a cash grab
Yeah.
at this point in time.
Yes.
Yeah, I hear you.
How many
You know,
billions
I mean,
do you
and that's,
need? Yeah.
you know, I mean, you get as an author writing new material. I mean, I think I've got 19 books out there now,
That's awesome.
and several different genres, and you
Yeah.
try to
You read a
be
lot.
original, and you read other people's work that is original, and here all the movie houses are doing remakes,
I
you
know.
know, and redoing old tired storylines, and it's like, why are you wasting your time with that when there is literally more original material out there never being exposed today than ever in history, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, there are, you know, and these are people.
There's millions of
When I was
screenplays out there
growing
right
up,
now.
there was I was a big fantasy reader, a big fantasy fan, you know, elves, dwarves, gnomes, Wheel of Time, that kind of story. I read a lot of that stuff, and there was something called formula fiction, and you could see that all the fantasy novels were being written under a certain formula, so that the only thing that was different was the characters and things like that. Um, Indie authors have blown that concept out of the water. You know, it's not even mentioned anymore, formula fiction, you know, because we're writing whatever. And we don't want to write to a formula. We want
Right.
to tell the story that's in our hearts, and we want to tell it in our own way. So, you know, I think right now we are at the not pinnacle, but we have brought more creativity and more originality into the literary world than has ever been seen before, and it's being ignored by the big boys for the most part.
It is.
They're
Western horror. I mean, I think that there's a hotness to it, but it's below the surface of the mainstream. You do get movies that come out. You do have a Bone Tomahawk that'll come out, or something like that. I mean, and I was
Yeah.
in a what do you call it, a round table with Joe Lansdale and Chuck Buda on Reader's Labyrinth, and went ahead and rattled off a whole bunch of those movies. But I mean, it's not like something that's everywhere all over the market. It's something that you have to explain to people. There are plenty of video games. Red Dead Redemption has a lot of Weird West stuff going on in it. But there's a lot of things like that. But it's something that's like how the Twilight series or whatever, you know, that really like Walking Dead that made a big jump. You've got all these people that don't read. And if somebody would really produce like a Western horror thing, well, if they would say, man, I'm going to take this stuff of B.L. Blankenship or whoever and go ahead and make that stuff, well, all of a sudden it could spike and people would be like, oh, this is cool. You know, it's like the band that's put out like 7 or 8 albums, but you just hear their single on the radio and you think they're brand new when they're not. That's what it would be like.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
there's some good
BL, I want
Western
to
horror out there. Like you said,
go ahead,
Bone
Al.
Tomahawk. What's the Burrowers? You ever seen that?
Yes.
Where they have the creatures that live underground and that's not a bad movie.
It's
but none
nice.
of them are
It's a good
hits. You know, none
presentation.
of them. Yeah, it is. It is. You know, none of them are money makers. You know, I don't think Bone Tomahawk was a money maker. You know, and that had a great cast. You know, so it's you know, I mean, your stories, Joe's stories, my stories. You know, we're like, you know, get it out there. It's better than seeing Black Adam or you know, Shazam 2. You know, it's just like
Well, I want to
Same
thank you for
crap,
coming
same
on
recycled
tonight.
garbage.
Thank you for coming on tonight, BL. You have some things coming up. You kept mentioning some
Yes.
conferences and stuff that you're.
Oh yeah, there's a ton. I've got them up as my banner picture on Facebook and on
Okay.
Twitter. So it says what all of my 2023 conferences are. In 2024, there will be more conferences, if not just me going back to the same ones or maybe stuff added. Those are the ones that I know of right now. And they just kind of go, a good ways through the year. I will say, as other authors are watching this, there's a lot of authors that I run into and they tell me that they're not making any money, that they're in the red, and I am. And a lot of the reason for that is because I try to make good decisions and keep the ceiling low. When you look at my stuff, I live in Kingston, Tennessee. That's right by Knoxville. You'll see I'm all over East Tennessee. Where am I going to be? All over East Tennessee. And the thing with that is that I don't have like a motel bill driving my cost up to where I'm not making money by like physically being at this thing. If it's something I just wanted to do, that's fine. But I'm trying to go to things with a business mindset, and it's like you need to just keep the ceiling low. I'm trying to build up a good like home base audience. I can sell stuff online all around the world and do. The US is the biggest by far, but there's a lot of like Western Europe. I've got a couple that hit in Australia and Canada. But
Are you doing audibles?
I am not on Audible yet, and it's wild because I listen to it all the time. If somebody's hearing this and if they're interested in doing an audiobook for me, I would absolutely love that. That would be great.
Well,
Particularly the Josie
it
Wells.
doesn't necessarily work like that.
Yeah, I've heard there's a couple things. It's profit sharing or paying them up front or what have you. I know a few friends that do that.
Right,
Yeah.
and you've got to audition some actors.
Yeah.
So you can get the voice you want for your story. I mean, it's not just
that's the important thing.
Somebody who's willing to do it.
Let me rephrase that. Do you sound just like Sam Elliott? Do you want to read my book? That's really what I picture. I think that the Josie Wells thing is going to hit over well. I don't know. I hear that there's a bigger following for traditional Western over
DJ Malaise. If you know who he is,
no,
we had him on the show and he did the remaining series, and he's a very good author.
Cool.
But on his audiobooks, he had this guy, and I can't remember his name, but he would do books in his normal voice, but then he did one of his books called Wolves, and he did it in this really super deep voice. So I mean, you've got to explore what they have for actors out there when you're doing Audible, and get someone who has the ability or the range to give you the tone you want. But either way, we're out of time. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
I wish we had more time with you, man.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, BL.
I'm going to check you all out.
All right.
I'll check out your books. Cool.
Sounds good. We'll see you.
I'm going to grab yours, man.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Check out BL Blankenship. Check his stuff out. Check out Joe's. Check out mine.
We are a Wyrd Realities production.
Yes. At Linktree, I guess everybody knows how to spell that with the .ee for Linktree, /Western Horror. That's me.
All right. Sounds good. Take care.
You got any more? Any more that you need to throw out there real quick? Or are you good?
That covers it. They're all there. Linktree.
We'll see you next time. Great. Thanks, BL. We really had a good time with you.